Hi, today at the ODIN S3 study group, we're talking about meeting formats. And essentially, we're describing and distinguishing between different meeting formats that can be useful in different working contexts so that the kind of activities people are doing can be met with a structure that's suitable for addressing those needs and people can get things done. Let's start with some orientation. Where can we find these patterns? Here in the big map of Sociocracy Patterns, meeting formats are over here on the left, and they're connected over here to meeting practices, which we've covered in detail in other sessions. In the navigation of the website for Sociocracy, you can see it in the menu under Patterns, Meeting Formats. And if you find yourself in meeting practices, go next door and check out meeting formats, which shows up like this. In general, why do we want to pick meeting formats? As I said in the abstract section, we want to match activities directly to what creates value so that we spend time creating good value and not using an inappropriate structure for framing up the things that we're trying to get done. So for example, if you're trying to use a heavyweight meeting structure for an activity like a stand-up, which is supposed to be super lightweight, you're not going to get a real good match between those two forms. So matchiness and effectiveness are at the heart of the choice of meeting formats. One of the sociocracy resources points to this meeting format, which is a good kind of default high-level structure where people check in. There's an agenda formation, a decision on which topics are on the agenda. We work through those topics, and this talks about backlog and evaluation. Another framing of this general format is that this closing section is about essentially checkout and how did you feel about this meeting? How are you leaving now? And depending on whether you're talking about a working meeting or a community call, you might use that closing round in slightly different ways. From an effectiveness standpoint, one of the most useful meeting formats is probably the planning and review meeting, where with a mind on what you're trying to achieve, you go look at the work you're trying to do and you plan the work that you want to do before the next checkpoint where you find out together whether you're being effective at serving your purpose. And so the planning meeting is what they're describing here is slanted toward like an agile work planning session where you break down work into chunks that can be estimated. And from if you're familiar with the software development process, this probably looks pretty familiar, but it doesn't have to be software. It could be any kind of work where you decided which things you're trying to achieve. You're estimating how much time each one will take, and then you choose which items you're taking on and which ones you're leaving off and saying, no, that's not the plan that we're doing right now. For planning meetings, every team can choose how frequently to do planning and what the rhythm is of their planning and review cycle. The review side is, of course, where the team says, okay, we planned to do a certain amount of work. Did we get that work done? How are we doing? Is there an opportunity right now to adjust the way we are doing our work? Show up some tensions, adjust our processes, and maybe say, we were planning to do this work and it didn't all get done. We could decide whether to continue doing that work or replan or throw it away. and take on a new set of work. So that's the planning and review meetings. Daily stand-up is another type, which we already touched on. The idea is that this wouldn't be a heavyweight kind of meeting. You wouldn't do a heavy framework around using the time because you might only have 10 minutes. In a sense, in this diagram, the check-in is the whole meeting. The daily stand-up focuses on coordinating today's work, figuring out where we're not making progress, where we didn't make progress yesterday, but we could change that today, and just be really synced up. And there's a little bit of an opportunity here also to bridge into some of the S3 governance practices that you can do in a very lightweight way around finding agreement on how this work right now will be done. So that's the daily stand-up type of meeting. Another sort of meeting might be more suitable for this review case and for other purposes where you're trying to come together and be coordinated about things that people have been on trajectory. So we'll recognize that this sequence is very similar to the diagram we saw a little bit ago. And without having to read through every item here, we can recognize that we're just trying to bring people who are not knowing what has been done by others into the loop. Not to tell them every story about everything that happened, but what has been achieved maybe, and what help can they get? And what have we done? And how can you help us? Getting coordinated and getting help where it's needed would be a short way to say what the coordination meeting is all about. And that brings us to governance meetings. When we're planning, when we're standing up and getting our daily work done, when we're coordinating, we may find some kinds of problems that can't directly be addressed through personal autonomy and work groups just doing what they know is good. They may find that there's a need to backlog governance activities and to push proposals that need a little bit more formal attention from a bigger group to facilitate a change, a formal change that they want to make in the structure of the organization, whether it's a work group or whether it's a unit of 50 people who are working together on a purpose. The governance meeting is a frame where the official record of what our purpose is and the official record of what our processes are can be modified through a consent process. And again, the structure of the meeting looks really familiar. It's been adapted a little bit in order to fit the context of governance. More patterns connected to governance are, of course, the consent process, focus on tensions, driving change through tensions, and pulling in new things when we need to pull them in. The last meeting format, actually the second to last meeting format that I'll cover today, is the retrospective. And this connects closely to feedback, where at an organizational level, that group reviews what's going on. How have we been doing against our governance drivers? Are we getting done the kind of stuff that we wanted to get done? And this meeting format is a little bit different. I think it follows the same essential pattern, but with the facilitated meeting, and governance meetings are going to be facilitated too, most likely. There's a little bit more of a sequence of leaving space, official space for different aspects of the retrospective, finding out what people's perspectives are on what's been going on, finding insights on, why is it that things have been going this particular way, and suggesting what they might do about it. Maybe this decide what to do step would bridge back into a governance meeting in which we've recommended to make these changes and we need an increment of budget in order to support those changes. So that's kind of a way that these different meeting formats may connect together. So this facilitated format and a set of guidelines on generating the right frame of mind, the retrospective meeting can give people the reflective perspective and facilitate, literally, the intended result of that retrospective call. And then coming back here, there's a sixth type of meeting that S3 doesn't recognize formally. And I call this type the working meeting. We get together in order to do work. And we may still check in and have a human connection before we get our work started, but then there doesn't necessarily need to be any of that meeting formality. You're just doing the work that you're needing to do to get done what you agreed to do together. So these are 6 different formats of meeting that we can pick in order to match the activities that we do in those different contexts directly to the value that we need to create in those situations so people can get things done together. Questions? Thoughts?
My favorite meeting format is the work meeting that S3 doesn't mention.
Yeah, I'm glad that you added that one. It is interesting that they don't include it. But I thought all these are great, and it's funny, I haven't really focused on them before. Other than the retrospective, that's kind of the one that I think have adopted the most. What do you all think?
So for me, I have a question about the stand-up meeting. Is it a stand-up meeting? I forgot what the meeting is called, where the check-in itself is the meeting. So I was under the impression that check-in is like a more informal kind of thing. But if the check-in itself is like a formal thing, then should it like follow any patterns? Like what am I working on? What will I be working on? Like those kind of things?
Yeah, when I said that the daily stand-up kind of doesn't follow the structure that we saw in this thing, in a sense, it's nothing but check-ins. It was kind of tongue-in-cheek to say that.
Okay.
Of the stand-up is that each person gets in and focuses on what they've achieved that they can hand off to someone else because they know somebody's waiting for it, or focuses on what they need because they're stuck in getting done the part of the work that they're on the hook to do right now. And so putting a big, heavy meeting format around the stand-up wouldn't be appropriate. It's much closer, though, to the check-in, where it's basically a round in which everybody does those things to address how to do today.
So specifically with check-ins, Randall, this might be deviating a little bit from the topic. Do you think speaking about what we are currently working on is like a good practice for check-ins? Because most of the times for check-ins, I just run out of things to say, like I'm doing good is the best I can come up with. Do you think that makes sense to just like say, hey, these are the different things I'm working on right now, like even if it's not relevant to the group?
Well, that's interesting. And it gets into the practice of check-in. One of the things that they present that suggests something that may be more useful than just hey, I'm doing good, is that a check-in can be a place to create human bonds and to be a person and to to set a more intimate frame of collaborating. Without a personal check-in, a meeting may only be about just very professional, the work, and just focusing on the work. And then when you're done focusing on the work, you hang up because you're done. But the added personal touch of the check-in round is really crafted to, I think it's really crafted to facilitate a cultural context in which people make human connections with each other that go beyond just what the work is.
Okay, that's interesting. So I just asked because if check-ins happen almost like rounds where, hey, what is your check-in? And I say a bunch of sentences, and then the next person comes in and says a bunch of sentences. Like, I feel like the human connection happens through the interaction as opposed to just sharing like a bunch of things. That's what I was thinking.
I've experienced the same in a way. The natural thing that we do in the first 5 minutes while we're waiting just a few more minutes for everyone to show up, for me, that's the real check-in.
Exactly.
Hey,
Yeah. I think I completely agree with that, Randall. Yeah.
and then like taking a formal section of check-ins feels a little bit contrived. On the other hand, if you don't hold explicit space for it, it's easy to not really check in. And you
Yeah,
just
but it
dive
can
into
go on
doing,
forever. Yeah. You're right.
or you just dive straight into doing your agenda and you miss your human connection entirely.
Yeah, or the quiet ones. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
I like that question. What else? Anything else? All right. In that case, let's wrap it up. Thank you for this conversation about meeting formats where we're trying to get things done and we're choosing the right structure to make it happen.
Thank you, Randall.